Chapter 3. The Echeloki. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. Albert Einstein. When I was invited to give an address at the annual conference of the Institute for the Study of American Cultures, ISAC, several years ago, I had no idea what to expect. Elephants in America, Jews in aboriginal New Mexico, Coxca in Mexico, the hiding place of ancient Maya secrets, how Egyptians measure the equinox, Borneo, the cradle of agriculture and navigation. Although anthropological orthodoxy labels the work of diffusionists crackpot science, why do such lunatic ravings persist? Asks popular archaeologist Brian Fagan in his book on human prehistory, The Great Journey, The Peopling of Ancient America. Diffusionist doctrine has been inching its way into the mainstream. A case in point is a Greek admiral named Maui who, it is claimed, left inscriptions as far distant as New Guinea and Chile. According to Harvard biology professor Barry Fell, Maui was a 3rd century BCE North African navigator in command of a large Libyan-Egyptian fleet. An extensive body of folklore survives throughout Polynesia concerning his exploits as a trickster and culture bearer who fished islands from the deep, somewhat like many wild Odysseus. A New Zealander, Fell was keenly interested in elucidating the origins of the Maori, the ancient first settlers in his native land. He came upon cave drawings at Sosora in western New Guinea, which he connected with an inscription in a cave near Santiago, Chile. After spending 8 years ransacking Harvard's Widener Library, he was able to decipher the latter as an example of Standard Libyan, a dialect of Egyptian spoken by the brown-skinned fisherfolk, whom the Greeks called Morai, that is, Moors, hence Morai. There were hundreds of similar inscriptions scattered throughout the Pacific. Comparing the Santiago inscription and Sora drawings, which included paintings, astronomical and navigational diagrams, and calculations in Greek and Egyptian, Fell reconstructed the events of an amazing feat of navigation in the ancient world. A Libyan fleet was dispatched between 235 and 225 BCE, under the auspices of Eratosthenes, director of the library at Alexandria. Sponsored by the Egyptian pharaoh, its mission was to circumnavigate the world. It established what we know now as the International Dateline. The admiral in charge was Maui, and the captain of one ship was Rada. Berkeley geographer George Carter translates the Santiago inscriptions as follows. Southern limit of the coast reached by Maui. This region is the southern limit of the mountainous land, the commander claims, by written proclamation, in this land exulting. To this southern limit he steered the flotilla of his ships. This land, the navigator claims, for the king of Egypt, for his queen, and for their noble son. The king, or pharaoh, referred to in this inscription is believed to be Ptolemy Euergetes III, called the Benefactor, whose wife was the Cyrenaic empress Bernice. He ruled until 221 BCE. Ptolemy III not only subjugated Libya, Cyrene, but his power is known to have extended as far eastward as India, where King Ashoka was his ally. We will encounter King Ashoka's name later on. These facts date the landfall made by Maui's ships in South America in 230, as Ptolemy III began his reign in 246. Fell concludes that Rada, Maui, and the 300 or so members of his expedition were the founding fathers of Polynesia. If the Libyan presence in the Pacific during the 3rd century BCE consisted of an entire fleet, one separated from its homeland for several years, women were most likely aboard. The expedition was probably a colonizing effort. The idea of Ptolemaic colony in the Far East is borne out by the presence of Mediterranean mitochondrial DNA in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, New Guinea, and Polynesia. Mitochondrial DNA is passed from a mother to her children, unchanged over millennia, so it is a good tool for determining the founding mothers of populations. One study of New Guinea lineage finds a sizable degree of haplogroup maternal lineage, H, a specific European type. Its incidence does not seem likely to be due to modern admixture, as often claimed of such an anomaly, for such a conclusion would entail a 19th or 20th century European woman, say an adventurous Victorian schoolteacher, marrying a native man. Among the drawings in the New Guinea cave studied by Fell, a figure he identified as an ancient Libyan instrument called the tanawa, or reckoner, a mechanical calculator of the 3rd century BC, intended to aid the study of planetary motions by converting position angles from polar to ecliptic coordinates. 2 subsequent experiments built models of the tanawa, from Greek, tenan, outstretched long, and proved it was used to determine longitude, an accomplishment not replicated until the 18th century. The Cherokee may have perpetuated a folk memory of this mechanical marvel in the legend of Tlanua, or Great Hawk, the name for which is almost exactly the same. Despite mounting evidence, scholars summon all their ingenuity to dismiss ancient testimony that Greeks, Egyptians, and other peoples of the Mediterranean could accomplish deep-sea voyages. An acknowledged expert on ancient seafaring, Lionel Cassan, in The Ancient Mariners, draws attention to 3 long-distance feats of navigation, but manages for different reasons to belittle their importance. The first comes from Egypt. He recalls the great state-operated maritime enterprise to fetch myrrh and other unguents and incenses from a distant land called Punt, identified with lands on the Gulf of Aden or Indian Ocean coast of Somalia and Ethiopia. This was some 2,000 years before the modern era. The pharaoh, Mentuhotep III, commissioned his minister, Henu, to cross the desert with 2,000 men, build a boat on Egypt's Red Sea port, and sail south in a ship 180 feet long and 60 feet wide, with a crew of 120, to establish a sea lane to the foreign source for precious ingredients used in Egypt's royal mummification process. 2 months later, Henu returned home. Kassan goes on to explain, however, that the Punt trade lapsed for a long period in Egypt, only to be revived 500 years later. He thus implies that Henu's expedition was an isolated incident. In a perplexing argument, he assigns the revival of Egyptian seafaring to the next piece of evidence that happens to survive. It is one that can hardly be ignored. Its instigator was Queen Hatshepsut, the 18th dynasty ruler who was one of only a handful of female pharaohs. She wore the royal beard, like Cleopatra. Hatshepsut erected a monument displaying her fleet docking at Punt and leaving under full sail laden with goods that included ebony, myrrh resin, live myrrh trees, various other types of incense, ivory, gold, eye cosmetic, skins, 3,300 head of cattle, natives and their children, native spears, apes, monkeys, dogs, even other panther alive captured for Her Majesty. So much for Egypt's feeble attempt to master the seas. A third demonstration of seafaring took place on continues under Pharaoh Necho in the 7th century BCE. After attempting to dig a canal between the Nile and the Red Sea, Necho commissioned Phoenicians to undertake the circumnavigation of Africa from east to west to explore an alternative route to the southern seas, Indian Ocean. They were to come home into the Mediterranean through the Strait of Gibraltar. Another feat of navigation discussed by Kassan might better be called a massive colonization effort. It was a Phoenician scheme from about 500 BCE to populate West Africa with 30,000 desert-dwelling Moors from the hinterland of Carthage, the new capital of present-day Tunisia. And so it goes. Does Herodotus write the Phoenicians were wont to visit a nation beyond the Pillars of Hercules, Gibraltar, and trade trinkets with the natives for gold? A fable. Sumerian tables of the 3rd millennium BCE describe voyages beyond the Western Sea, Atlantic, and establishment of colonies in a distant land. Surely this could not be America, for that land had to wait 3,500 years discovered by a European. Never mind that Sumerian tablets with cuneiform writing found in the 19th century in Lexington, Georgia, and a Sumerian tablet once in the possession of Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce tribe is displayed today in the West Point Military Museum. Did Barry Fell find correspondences between Ptolemaic Egyptian and more than 400 terms referring to mariners, navigation, astronomy, meteorology, justice and administration, medicine and economy in the Micmac and Abenaki languages of present-day New England? Coincidence? The anthropological Monroe Doctrine clearly states that there were no meaningful Old World influences in the New World before 1492 CE. Yet, scholars have long been struck by cultural traits shared by Indonesians, Polynesians, and Native American peoples. University of California, Davis, retired geography professor Stephen Jett draws attention to several similarities between Southeast Asians and Native Americans. The inhabitants of Borneo, for example, physiologically resemble Arawak Indians of the Caribbean. Natives in both regions use slash-and-burn agriculture, blowguns, and head-hunting trophies, customs found also on the Cherokee. It is possible that the seacoast homeland of the Cherokee, subject to floods notable for its water monsters, mentioned in so many accounts, corresponds to the shelf, a now submerged part of Southeast Asia, joined once with Indonesia and New Guinea. According to Oxford professor Steve Oppenheimer, this fertile and populous region gradually inundated by rising sea levels, beginning with the meltdown after the last ice age. Jett believes that migrations to escape flooding began at 3600 BCE and lasted until as late as 300 BC, the time of the first Polynesian voyages. Could this explain why the vision of the echeloki speaks of an increasingly crowded land? Might it also account for the appearance of the route taken across the ocean, once described as cut off, visible only in broken fragments on the ocean floor? The rising waters of the Earth's new climate would certainly have produced a shifting and precarious new seashore. It makes sense that scattered islands sighted by the first voyager in the Pacific were sometimes never found again, since they could not turn back against prevailing currents and winds. It should be noted that the Libyan fleet never returned home. For more pieces of the puzzle, let us turn now to Cherokee author William Eubanks. He was a member of the Kiowa Society who wrote under the name Unanuti. Eubanks, the translator for the Cherokee Nation, an indefatigable contributor to the Southern Lecture Circuit. Around 1900, he authored a tract titled The Red Race, Originators of the Ancient Apollo Worship. In it, he alludes to many of the same mysteries contained in the vision of the echeloki, which, as we have seen, was published by him and attributed to Sakya Sanders. Eubanks lends support to the idea of Greeks, Jews, and Egyptians mingling together to form the Cherokee people when he writes, "While the Cherokee is neither Greek, Hebrew, Egyptian, nor Hindu, he has in his language words purely Greek, Hebrew, Egyptian, and Sanskrit. And while his ancient religious customs and rites bear a strong resemblance to the rites and religious customs of the ancient Jewish religion, and his secret religion or mysteries is similar in many respects to the Egyptian, still there is strong evidence that he is neither Hebrew nor Egyptian." He argues further that the Cherokee identity, or their true name, has never been found out and perhaps never will be, but it is a designation given to those initiated as a tribe into the Eastern Mysteries by a wise branch of the tribe known as those who spoke the language of Seg, Hasaga. What about the language called Seg? This is an enormously valuable clue. Seg is an Austronesian language of Indonesia, part of the very large language family known as Central Eastern Malayo-Polynesian, with a western form called Tai Seg, and eastern form spoken in the Madang province of Papua New Guinea known as Sek or Gedagid. The word points to the dispersals from Sunderland and initial sea voyages of the Melanesians and Polynesians, since it is the name of an important non-native clan in New Guinea. According to Oppenheimer, the north coast of New Guinea acted as an important route for seaborne evacuation from the sinking landmass of Sunderland. In Out of Eden, his sequel to the book Eden in the East, he postulates that island Indonesia teemed with life and the source of new currents of agriculture and navigation. It was the true Cray civilization, not India or Mesopotamia. Madang was the center for an eastward Polynesian diffusion that began about 500 BCE. Modern science associates these Austronesians and Malay people with the Lapita culture that spread a distinctive style of ceramics from Southeast Asia throughout Indonesia, Borneo, New Guinea, and Melanesia, far west as Fiji and Samoa during the first 3 millennia BC. Thus, an advanced, lighter-skinned civilization from Sunderland mixed with Papuan-speaking non-Seg natives. It is hard to resist the temptation to conclude that the latter, non-Seg natives, correspond to Cherokees, black-race terrible invaders, who came in boats over the waters. These are presumably Austronesians and Melanesians, who waged war against the Malaysian and Indonesian people from Sunderland. Recall that after repeated invasions, there was no land to fight over, since it all sank into the ocean. To this day, there seems to be recognizable among Hawaiian Islanders, as well as the Cherokees, a certain Malaysian type. There is evidence other than oral tradition that Polynesians joined the Cherokee. Aside from the Pacific Rim traits and characteristics like blowguns mentioned above, one of the 7 Cherokee clans is called echeloki, the Twister people. This name should mean something like people kilo, and can be taken as strictly Hawaiian. In Hawaiian, kilo, there's no G in Hawaiian, means twisted. Compare Greek ila, rope, heel, twist, wrap, helix, twisted. Gilolo was the land where the earliest ancestors of the Hawaiians came from, identified by later Spanish, Dutch, and English navigators as the Malgas in the Indonesian archipelago. The legend goes that Hawaii's capital city, Hilo, got its name from the natives' skill in twisting together plant fibers to make rope. The same root appears in hula, the dance, twist. Such a derivation explains why the Twister clan members were a proud people who strutted when they walked and twisted their shoulders in a haughty manner. The Echeloki clan's cultural memory evidently reflects an ancient connection with the Polynesians who accompanied the echeloki, the people from Hilo. Such an identification may also explain Twisters were considered by the other clans as extraneous foreigners, a group composed of prisoners of war, captives, and refugees who had only a tenuous connection to the Cherokees. Chapter 4 presents several famous Twister clan lines, often representing female HB, the classic South Asian and Pacific Islander type. Tagwatihi, Cherokee medicine man photographed by James Mooney in the 1890s, not only physically resembles native Hawaiians, but also seems to bear a Hawaiian name, one that may be derived from Greek. We have seen how the word takwa means whale or sea monster. Curiously, one of Maui's names is Talaga, very close to Chaki. Maui's father is Tangaroa, or Tanoa, seemingly designating a Dana'an, or Greek. Tanoa was the father of all fair-haired children, and came from the land called Ata. Atia, which appears to be the same word as Attica, was the ancient Polynesian homeland to the west, full of high altar temples. One of them was very spacious and was built as a meeting place for gods and men. And here, after death, the spirits of the ancient foregathered with the gods. Here originated different kinds of sports and games, and feasts to the gods, Rango, Tani, Ruanuku, Tu, Tangaroa, Tangaiti. Here were meeting places for the great chiefs of those days, when appointing rulers, devising measures for the good of the people. Here, too, originated the wars that caused the people to enter and spread over the Pacific. One could hardly invent a more fitting folk memory of Greek culture. Athens, the capital of Attica, was the envy of the world for its marble buildings dedicated to the gods of Olympus. Its trades, games, amusements, learning, food, luxury, art, philosophy, military prowess, and democratic government. It is handed down that the ancestors of the Polynesians left this land when it was governed by the great king, Tutorangi Marama, about 450 BC, a date that corresponds exactly with Athens' golden age under Pericles. The Hawaiian word that epitomizes this lost world is karioi, leisure, ease, literally the same word as Greek, amusements. Christian missionaries fought to eradicate Polynesians' pursuit of karioi, often translating the beloved concept in English as lewdness. It seems that Ani Kotakewi, or Wild Potato Clan, just like the Twister Clan, exists only among the Cherokee. This clan seems to reflect the echeloki's tribes in South America. Potatoes come from Peru and were not grown in North America until their introduction by Europeans. Could it be that the name of this clan is the singular Kotakewa, pronounced approximately Katiqua, is a corruption of Chua, the original name of the Andean people we know today as the Incas? What about the Paint Clan, Aniwodi? Paint people seems questioned to be the customary term for Phoenicians, whose name for themselves was Kanai, Canaanites. This appears to be rendered in Native America Anawa, the name of a tributary of the Ohio, and the Kanoe Indians, Adair, specifically as a Canaanite tribe. In the Old World, phoenikoi, the Greek term, was used to designate people associated with the phoenix, a mythological bird that rose from its own ashes. The date palm and a reddish blue or purple dye, all emblems of Punic civilization. Phoenician wealth was founded on Tyrian purple, a violet purple dye derived from the murex sea snail's shell. They stepped into the tin trade of the Minoans after about 1200 BCE, moving their operations successfully from Lebanon to Asia Minor to Carthage. Among Cherokee, Paint Clan members were traditionally the doctors and hunters, kanati, and Greek kanati, noblemen. Of history, tikano, from Greek tikana, events, and prophet and masters of protocol, diplomacy, and ceremony. Peace chiefs and ukus, or wise men in the Greek model, were often chosen from Paint Clan ranks. It is significant that the Kitua culture bearers in the vision of the Elohi are called ones from heaven. The word for heaven used here is the Kalunlati, literally the up above. When Cherokee storytellers talk about the world before the present one, it is either up above a country called Kalunlati, or in the sometimes called Elohihi. It is said that gods and goddesses, animals, plants, and every other type of being lived there until it became overpopulated. This land still is on the other side of the vault of heaven, which is hard as rock and impenetrable. Antiquity, it was only the Egyptians, that is, Ptolemaic Greeks, as well as Asian peoples, along with the Cherokee and Hopi, who knew the world was round, flat. It must have been a difficult concept to accept, even by highly educated, inquisitive minds of the day. Indeed, the theory slumbered in Europe until the Renaissance. The Cherokee Tuscarora medicine man Rolling Thunder had an astoundingly ecumenical worldview. Bryce, who studied under him, remembers he gave long talks about the pyramids, the Book of Exodus, Edens, Babylonians, Greeks, Jews, and other ancient peoples. Finally said, "It sounds like our people were a lot like the Jews, Greeks, and Egyptians." Rolling Thunder looked sternly at him and snapped, "Our people were not like the Greeks and Egyptians. They were the Jews, Greeks, and Egyptians." Summing up, we may hypothesize that the Cherokee nation of American Indians dated as remnants of Ptolemy III's expedition around 230 BCE and was to circumnavigate the earth to test Eratosthenes' new concepts in its size and shape. Archaeological evidence of this comes from cave drawings at Sosora on Nor Bay in western New Guinea, depicting, among other things, the Tanawa navigational instrument used by the Alexandrian ships. Additional archaeological clues are an etching of a Greek hope in Tennessee, along with the form and function of the Cherokee's katias, or council house. The Cherokee's tribal echeloki originally meant colonists. Clans, perhaps the Five Me, the Bear Clan, Said Clan, Bow Clan, and Flute Clan.